Okay, my name is Mark Reeder, and I had a couple comments I'd like to make on a paper that has been published online in medRxiv by Magagnoli et al. It pertains to the study of 368 U.S. veterans hospitalized with COVID-19. And cutting to the chase, what I'm really advocating is that the authors add a statement, and this could be done in the comments section of their own paper, where they state that it was found that, and they'd have to fill in a number, blank of the 7 patients reclassified from the no HC to the HC group died. Okay, likewise, blank of the 12 patients reclassified from no HC to HC died. And I want to make it clear here, we'll kind of demonstrate that this number has to either be 6 or 7, and this number has to be either 7 up to 12. Okay, and can mathematically show that those are the only possible outcomes using the data that they provided. So I want to kind of give a little quick overview of how I kind of got to this result and why it is it's so important for the authors to be transparent about what those numbers are. So what I'm doing here is showing, if I can tighten the view a little bit, the actual tables that are given in the text, 2 of them specifically. Table 4 and Table 3. And I'm not talking about anything having to do with the medical condition of the patients. I'm really only just looking at the data given in 2 of these tables. So Table 4 is shown here, and what its label is the pre-ventilation treatment. And the reason I want to show Table 4 before Table 3 is that chronologically this came first. So if you look at the numbers here, what we can see is that the authors used to represent the number of patients in each group. So here we have 3 groups based on treatment. One is hydroxychloroquine only, one is hydroxychloroquine plus azithromycin, HC+AZ, and the other is one that has not been given hydroxychloroquine. So the focus of the paper was hydroxychloroquine, or HC is the initial here, and so there's some details about the state of the patients and some things like that in earlier tables by the authors, and I'm not kind of focusing on that. That's a subject of a different debate. And the main point is that there were 90 patients that were given HC, 101, HC+AZ, and 177 not given anything prior to the what would be ventilation if that's what they went on. And of those, what you can see here is that, let's take the center column. Of the 101 patients, 7 of those, given the HC+AZ combination, went on a vent. 11 died without being placed on a ventilator, and 83 were discharged without being placed on a ventilator. So that's how it's broken out here for the no HC group as well. So, bearing in mind that, the data that was collected here is based on what doctors are trying to do to save lives. And so it's not like it's a controlled study. So it's sort of unusual to do this, but understandable the reasons why the authors had to change the top line numbers around just a little bit, because there were 19 patients initially in the no HC group who were transferred out of the HC group because they were given a treatment after going on a vent. Okay, so if you remember here, there are actually 177. Let me widen just a little bit here. So you can see the last 2 groups there. Okay, so there were initially 177 patients in the no HC group, and that number went down to 158. Okay, likewise for the HC+AZ, it was 101, and that one went up to 113 because 12 patients were placed in that group. In other words, they were given this drug combination after going on a vent. Okay, likewise then for the HC group, the number went up by 7, 90 to 97. So this is just what's reported, and in that outcome, the way it's labeled here, we can eliminate the vent line. The authors eliminated the vent line and listed it just in terms of death and discharge. Okay, so if you add these 2 numbers up, they come up to 97, and likewise for each of these 2 over here. Okay, so what I want to do is let's take a look, deeper dive into what happened to these 19 patients Okay, and the starting place is actually over in this column right here. Okay, so we have in the no HC group a total of 18 deaths after the 19 patients had been transferred out. Okay, so we can look at this column over here and say that 15 died before going on to event. So definitively we can say, since only patients are being transferred out and not in, that 3 of the patients that remained on event died. So the no HC group we know that 3 of the remaining patients died. Now the question is, how many of those remaining patients were there? Well, that's pretty easy to work out. We started with 25. If we subtract the 19 transferred out, that leaves 6. Okay? So we know definitively 3 out of 6 died that remained in the no HC group. Okay, so let me make sure I'm still here on the page. Okay. A little bit hard to see the numbers here, but well, let's zoom out just a touch here. Hopefully it'll come through okay. Focusing on the numbers now. Okay, so now let's kind of look at the HC group. Okay, we initially had 12 deaths in this column, okay, in this row. I'm sorry, we had 9 here in this location that died, and ultimately 27 died. That means that the 18 additional deaths occurred from the 12 that were initially on the event, added to the 7 that were transferred from the no HC group over to the HC group. Okay, so let's kind of make a note here. 27, okay, from here, minus the 9 equals 18 deaths. So that's a pretty high number out of only, we started with 12 down here, plus 7 over here. So what that means is 18 out of 19 on event in the HC group died. Okay. So if we kind of think about this, analyzing what happened to the patients before they went on to event, what that means, if you think about the 19 that were transferred out of the HC group, so this 25 here, 19 were transferred out, okay, 7 went here, okay, and we know that 18 out of 19 total had died, so that means that either 6 of 7 or 7 of 7 in the no HC group originally died. Okay, so of the 7 transferred in, either 6 of 7 or 7 of 7 died. Okay, from no HC group. Okay, so that's a high percentage, and that's probably worth a separate discussion by itself, but I don't want to focus on that. Rather, I want to look at what happens with the center column, and that's going to be the focus that I'm going to look at a little bit more here. Okay, so we had 7 go on event, and to that, you can tell by n, going from 101 to 113, 12 are added in. Okay, so we have 19 patients also who ended up on event, 7 given the HC+AZ treatment prior, and again, going from here, we had 12 more transferred in, so we have 7 plus 12 down here. And now we can look at the number of deaths that goes from 11 in this row and column combination up to 25. So that means we had 14 deaths. Okay, 14 out of 19 in the HC+AZ died after vent. Okay, so what that means, though, is a little bit harder to discern. in that we know we have 14 total, but that could have come from the 7 originally on the vent after being given this drug combination, or and 7 would have then come from those transferred in, or that 14 could have been arrived at by the 12 coming in from the no HC group added to only 2 from the HC plus AZ group over here based on what was given pre-ventilation. Okay, so why could that be something that is important to consider? Okay, so let's kind of go down here for a second and set up what we might want to think of as a new table. Okay? Okay, so let's say we want to set up a table that is based on the outcomes where there's sufficiently early treatment at least indicated. Okay, so how would we do that? Well, let's look at the top table 3 again and make a case that we don't know, for those who died prior to ventilation, exactly when the drug was given. The other thing to consider here is that it could be that those in this row here, death without ventilation, it could be that those had DNR orders in place. In other words, don't go to any great lengths to revive this particular patient because perhaps, unfortunately, they had some kind of late-stage cancer or other type of disease that could have been a contributor here. So if you wanted to focus on those that you know were given some treatment sufficiently early, we could look at only those who eventually went on a ventilator or those who were discharged. Okay, now I want to make it clear that that's not the only way you could look at this data. I'm not saying that the authors should do anything to remove Table 4 or Table 3 that they already have. All I'm doing is saying let's look at this with a different possibility if we focus on just those cases, excluding those who were not given what would be a reasonable life-saving, at least at the time thought, to go ahead and look at a vent. Okay, so let's do 2 possibilities here. And we're going to focus here first on what would be the worst case for the HC plus AZ combination. Okay, and I'm focusing now on those given that drug combination prior to either a ventilation or to discharge. Okay, so if we do that, how do we come up with those numbers? Well, it turns out, and what I'm going to do here is focus on the center column. Okay, I'm going to simplify matters by only looking at these 2 cases. So the way we would arrive at the number of patients we'd be looking at would be to start with this number, 101, and subtract the number of deaths here, 11, and that would get us to 90 for the total. Likewise, for the no HC group, which is the other one I'm going to look at, we start with 177 and we subtract the 15 in the death, those who died without ventilation group. So we're doing the same thing to each of these combinations here to keep it apples to apples. And that would take you down to 162. Again, just to be clear, I'm not advocating that any of this data be removed. I'm looking at, what you might be able to do as far as another analysis goes. Okay. So I've got 2 ways of looking at this. One is a worst case analysis for the HC plus AZ combination. When I say worst case, what would be assumed here is that all 7 of those who were given this drug combination prior to ventilation, then subsequently went on a vent, if all 7 of those died, okay, this number would remain 7, this number would remain 83. And if we looked at that ratio, 7 out of the total of 90 would have died, and that would have been corresponding to the worst case possible for this drug combination in terms of percentage of deaths. Now let's look at the no HC group, okay, and say, gee, Dr. Reed, how do you come up with these numbers? Well, the first number here is 3, okay, and that is the 3 out of the 6 who went on a ventilator for the no HC group that died. And so we know that number is certain. The 6 in the second column would be consistent with having 6 of the 7 who died from the no HC group and who went over to the HC only group. Okay, so the important thing is here, this can either be a 6 or a 7, and those are the only 2 possibilities. We've already shown that because 18 out of 19 who went on a ventilator died. And then the last one here is that even if 7 in this group died over here with the HC plus AZ, there were 14 total deaths, so there still had to be 7 who passed away who were not given the HC-AZ combination nor HC by itself in that initial group who were transferred over. We don't know when after ventilation they were given. I'll point that out as well. So we can tally those up. 3 plus 6 is 9 plus 7 is 16. Okay, and we also know that 146 were discharged by doing the complement cases over here, where we had the 1 from the no HC group, 5 from the that were transferred over to HC, 5 from the no HC group transferred to the HC plus AZ, added to the 140 that we know were discharged there at the end, and we'd have 146. The significant part here is that we now can calculate this percentage as well and do a little comparison. And even for the worst case scenario for the HC plus AZ, the number comes out better. And that the percent that died, again, excluding those who died without a ventilator, which, again, making an assumption here that perhaps there are some other factors at play related to either timing or the condition of the patient. This number is lower, at 7.8%, than the number over here, which would really be the best case for the no HC group, almost 10%. So 7.8% compared to 9.9%. Okay, so at least that's what the numbers show out to be here. But remember, this is the worst case for the drug. Now I want to focus on the best case for this particular drug combination. I'll show you how we arrive at these numbers. Widen it out a little bit. Okay. So if we started out with the 7 patients who were initially in this group who were placed on a ventilator, it's possible that 5 of those patients recovered in the HC plus AZ group, leaving only 2 who were given the drug combination prior to either ventilation or to discharge, who would have died. Meaning that 88, which is the 83 that are in table 4 already, added to 5 who would have recovered, give you 88, meaning that only 2.2% of those patients may have died, okay, in that particular category. On the other hand, for the no HC group, we know this number is right, the 3 out of 6 that remained in the group. But it is possible that all 7 of the patients who were reclassified from no HC to HC after going on a vent, it's possible that all 7 died. And ending up with the, to get to 5 here, okay, well there's 14 total deaths, so that would mean we'd have 2 in this group plus 12. Okay, so that would be consistent with all 12 of the patients transferred or reclassified from the no HC group to the HC plus AZ group. If all 12 of those died, that would mean that we'd have a total of 22 deaths in the category of those not having been given hydroxychloroquine prior to going on to a vent or prior to discharge. Okay, and likewise you can add up those other numbers, and this assumes 0 of those being discharged after going on a vent for both categories that were reclassified, giving you 140 here. And these two numbers add up, as you can see. Significance could be big, because this would show only 2 of 90 would have died if they were given HC plus AZ prior to either vent or discharge. In other words, given early or to someone who was healthy enough that they would not have a DNR order in place that would allow them to go on a vent. If this number is actually, for the best case scenario, correct, it would mean only 2.2% of those patients died given HC plus AZ compared to 13.6% in the no HC category. Okay, now we're not talking about a mild improvement, but rather a dramatic improvement. Okay, so this is kind of the bottom line. We don't know whether this best case scenario holds, where we've got a factor of 6 difference, nor do we know, could it be not quite so good? Could it be that the HC plus AZ is better, but only by about a 20% margin, 78 to 99, 7.8 to 9.9, okay? And it could also be in between, depending on what those numbers are. So that takes me back to the statement that I initially mentioned. We kind of have shown here that we need to have those numbers in order to come up with some kind of a definitive analysis. And really, it's on the authors to provide those. I will mention that they were critical of the work by, in their reference 1 by Raoult et al. And, you know, just from an academic standpoint, they should address the issue, even independent of the fact that we're talking about a situation where people are making decisions based in part on their analysis here. Just simply from an academic point of view, it would be appropriate for them to lay their cards on the table here as far as what their data actually shows. I will comment that as far as best and worst case scenario goes, it's impossible for me to say which is which is more likely, which is the actual outcome. That's up to the authors to do. But I will comment that the authors themselves make a statement on page 17 of their article that HC with or without AZ was more likely prescribed for the more severe disease. So if we look over here and say, you know, what that outcome would be, there is some cause to think that you would be more likely for the best case for HC plus AZ to be present than for the worst case, okay, based on the author's own description here. And the thing is that, I'll conclude by this, is to say that the statement here can be made without any kind of analysis that I've kind of put forth here. In other words, it's not necessary that the authors think that this approach to tabulating the data is even appropriate. They may have very good reasons for thinking that it's not, but by providing this kind of a statement, there is no harm done, neither to the quality of the academic work that they have done, nor to any kind of patient group. And on top of that, it is clear that they have the data. They could not have produced Table 4 and Table 3 if they did not have that data in hand already. And so a simple statement can be made in the comment section of the medrxiv.org page or elsewhere that allows other researchers to consider the data that they have collected and synthesized in their own report. And that's at the heart of producing academic work, is that it is put out there so that people have a chance to contemplate what has been done, consider the analysis by the authors, and also extend the analysis by considering their own experience. So I'd like to thank you for your time, and I'll conclude with that.